I was sitting at our old oak dining table, watching steam rise from my coffee cup. Morning light filtered through the kitchen window, softly illuminating the scratched wooden surface. The day was supposed to start calmly, but the atmosphere in the room was suffocating. My husband, Andre, was nervously pacing the creaky floor, each heavy step radiating irritation. The argument from last night still hung in the air like a thick fog that refused to lift. Andre's sister, Maria, had once again demanded financial help. It wasn't the first time, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. She had asked for my credit card to cover her so-called emergencies, which usually turned into yet another shopping spree or impulsive spending. When I firmly refused, it set off a chain reaction that ended with Andre's fury. I took a sip of my coffee, the bitterness in my mouth mirroring the tense atmosphere around me. Andre's constant pacing was getting on my nerves, but I tried to maintain an outward calm. I could feel his gaze drilling into me, silently demanding I change my decision. But I couldn't, and wouldn't. This had gone on for too long. "Andre," I began softly, breaking the heavy silence. "We need to talk about this calmly. We can't keep enabling Maria's irresponsible spending. It's unfair to us, and it doesn't help her in the long run." He stopped and turned to me, his face burning with anger. "Unfair? Doesn't help? Lena, she's my sister. Family. We have to help when our loved ones are in trouble." "How can you be so selfish?" I flinched at his words, but didn't back down. "It's not selfishness, Andre. It's about setting boundaries. We've helped her so many times already and nothing changes. She needs to learn to manage her own finances." Andre's nostrils flared, and I could see the vein on his forehead pulsing. "You don't understand. You've never had siblings. You don't know what it means to be responsible for them." His words stung, but I tried not to show it. Maybe I don't have siblings, but I understand responsibility perfectly well. And right now, our responsibility is our own financial stability. We can't keep draining our resources to bail Maria out of problems she creates for herself. For a moment, it seemed like Andre might soften. I even thought my words might have finally gotten through to him. But then his gaze hardened, and I realized I was wrong. "You're going to give Maria your credit card," he said in a low, threatening tone. "She's coming over today, and you'll hand it to her with a smile on your face. Got it?" A chill ran down my spine at his tone, but I wasn't going to give in. "No, Andre, I won't do that. We can help Maria in other ways. Ways that would actually benefit her in the long term. Maybe we could help her make a budget or see a financial advisor." I didn't get to finish. Suddenly, Andre grabbed his coffee mug from the kitchen counter and hurled it at me. It all happened as if in slow motion. The dark liquid arced through the air, and in the next moment, scalding coffee splashed across my cheek, neck, and blouse. Pain seared my skin, and I gasped in shock. The mug hit the floor with a crash, shattering into pieces across the linoleum. I instinctively pressed my hands to my face, feeling the burning heat radiating from my scalded skin. Andre roared, his voice echoing through the kitchen. "You'll pay for this. Maria's coming today, and you'd better give her your damn credit card. Or get out of here." His words burned more than the hot coffee. I stared at him in a daze, struggling to process what had just happened. The man I married, the man I loved with all my heart, had just revealed the depths of his control and cruelty. Trembling, I wiped my face with a kitchen towel. The searing pain from the coffee was nothing compared to the pain in my soul. Andre stormed out of the house, slamming the door so hard that the framed photos on the wall rattled. For a few moments, I sat motionless, staring at the mess scattered across the table and floor. Coffee dripped slowly from the edge of the table, forming a puddle on the floor, while the shards of the broken mug glinted in the morning light. It felt as though those ceramic shards were a symbol of the shattered pieces of our marriage. As the initial shock began to fade, a realization took root. This house, once our shared and cozy haven, was no longer my home. It had become a battlefield where I felt neither safe nor respected. The walls, which had once held our dreams and hopes, now closed in around me like the suffocating embrace of Andre's anger and Maria's endless demands. I stood up heavily, feeling the coffee-soaked blouse cling unpleasantly to my skin. Looking around the kitchen, I was flooded with memories of when Andre and I painted the walls together, laughing as more paint ended up on us than on the walls. Our first Thanksgiving in this house, when we managed to burn the turkey but still had a great time. Those countless morning coffee chats at this very table where we planned our future. Now all those memories felt tainted, clouded by the cruelty of the present. Laughter had turned to shouting, warmth to icy indifference, and love, was it even love anymore? Now it felt more like control and manipulation. I wasn't sure anymore. Walking to the bathroom, I winced as I looked in the mirror. My cheek was red and throbbing from the hot coffee, and a bruise was already starting to form. As I gently dabbed my face with a damp cloth, my mind raced. How had we gotten to this point, where Andre's love for his sister turned into a toxic obsession? Why had I become the enemy in my own marriage? Pressing a cool compress to my cheek, I heard Andre's words echo in my head again. Get out of here. Maybe that's exactly what I needed to do to survive? Leave? The thought was terrifying but also empowering. Could I do it? Where would I go? What would I do? But looking at my reflection, at the fear and pain in my own eyes, I realized I had no choice. I couldn't stay here. Couldn't live like this anymore. Andre had crossed a line that couldn't be forgiven. And I had to draw my own. My hands shook as I picked up my phone. I needed to talk to someone, ask for help, figure out how to move forward. But as I scrolled through my contacts, I realized with a pang how isolated I'd become. Most of my friends had drifted away, tired of Andre's domineering behavior or my endless excuses. Why couldn't I meet up with them? My eyes landed on Katya's name. My best friend since college, who had always been there for me, even when I pushed her away. I hesitated for a moment, guilt washing over me for ignoring her warnings about Andre. But swallowing that guilt, I pressed the call button. As the phone rang, I took a deep breath, trying to muster my courage. I didn't know what lay ahead, but I was certain of one thing. This couldn't go on. And I was finally ready to take a step forward. I couldn't, and wouldn't, be Andre's punching bag anymore, literally or figuratively. It was time to reclaim my life, my independence, and my self-respect. The phone kept ringing, and with each second, my resolve grew stronger. Whatever happened next, I was going to handle it on my own terms. No more compromises with my conscience, and certainly no more sacrificing my well-being for someone else's whims. As I waited for Katya to pick up, I made a silent promise to myself. This was the last time Andre would hurt me. From this moment on, I was choosing myself. After my conversation with Katya ended, I spent about an hour in a stunned silence. My heart pounded in my chest as I replayed the events of the morning over and over in my mind. The quiet ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway felt unnaturally loud, as if it were counting down the moments of my crumbling reality. I glanced around the living room, taking in the remnants of our shared life. The photos on the walls chronicled our relationship, from our first trip to Odessa to our wedding on the Black Sea coast. The furniture we'd picked out together at a small antique shop in Kyiv now stood as silent witnesses to the slow decay of our marriage. When had we gone from a happy, in-love couple to this? My gaze fell on the coffee table, where our wedding photo sat in a frame. I reached out and picked it up, running my fingers over the glass. In the picture, we were sitting in a gondola in Venice, laughing as Andre tried unsuccessfully to take a selfie, while the gondolier rolled his eyes behind us. I remembered how carefree and hopeful we'd been then, believing love could overcome any obstacle. A tear fell onto the glass, and I realized I was crying. Unable to bear looking at that past happiness any longer, I placed the photo face down. The house that had once been our sanctuary now felt like a prison, its walls closing in, reminding me of every minute lived here, now poisoned. I pressed my hand to my cheek, still feeling the burn from the spilled coffee. It was a constant ache, a reminder of how low we'd fallen and the line Andre had crossed. It was the final straw. There was no going back. That realization brought a strange calm. The decision I'd struggled to make for so long suddenly became crystal clear. I needed to leave, not just temporarily, but for good. With that resolve, I sprang into action, heading to our bedroom, my bedroom now, and opening the closet. I yanked the first suitcase I saw off the shelf, an old blue Samsonite we'd bought for our honeymoon. As I pulled it down, shoeboxes tumbled from above, scattering their contents across the floor. I knelt to pick them up and noticed a small velvet box. My hands trembled as I opened it, revealing the pearl earrings Andre had given me for our first anniversary. He'd been so proud of himself, having saved up for months to buy them. For a moment, I considered leaving them behind, but then I thought, no, these are mine, and he won't get anything else of mine. I tossed the earrings into the suitcase and began packing clothes and essentials. My hands shook, but my mind was surprisingly clear, as if a veil had lifted, and I could finally see the path ahead. I moved through the house, gathering things I couldn't part with. My laptop, where I kept all my writing, the old patchwork quilt my grandmother made when I left for college, a box of letters from my parents, who had long since passed. Each item I packed felt like a declaration of freedom, a reclaiming of the parts of myself I'd let Andre suppress. In the kitchen, I hesitated before opening the cabinet above the fridge. Behind a stack of rarely used cookbooks was a small locked metal box. I pulled it down and entered the code. My mother's birthday. Inside was the emergency fund I'd been saving for years. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start a new life. As I stuffed the bills into my bag, I caught my reflection in the microwave door. The woman staring back at me felt both familiar and foreign. Her eyes were red from crying, a bruise was forming on her cheek, but there was a determination in her gaze that I hadn't seen in years. I thought of all the excuses I'd made for Andre's behavior. He's just stressed from work. He'll calm down once he sorts out his family issues. I'd believed that if I loved him harder, supported him more, he'd become the man I fell in love with again. But now I understood. Maybe that man had never existed. My Andre was an illusion, a projection of my own hopes and desires, not the person standing before me now. I went to the study to gather important documents, birth certificates, insurance numbers, bank statements. While rifling through the cabinet, I came across our marriage certificate. I paused, staring at it, remembering the day we stood before our family and friends, promising to love and cherish each other. Now those vows felt hollow. In a surge of emotion, I grabbed a pen and drew a thick black line through our names. It wasn't legally binding, of course, but it felt liberating, a symbolic end to this marriage as I reclaimed my sense of self. When I loaded the last of my bags into the car, I turned and looked at the house where we'd lived for 6 years, trying to build what I thought was a shared life. Now it held only bitterness and betrayal. I'd sacrificed so much for Andre, my dreams, my friendships, even my sense of self-worth. But I wasn't going to anymore. I considered leaving a note, explaining why I was leaving, but what more could I say to a man who'd already said everything by throwing that coffee mug at me? He'd made his choice, and now I was making mine. My heart clenched as I got into the driver's seat, but with it came a tiny spark of hope. I wasn't just running away. For the first time in years, I was choosing myself. The future was uncertain, but now it belonged to me alone. As I turned the key in the ignition, I couldn't help but hear Andre's voice in my head. Maria's coming over later. The arrogance. In his world, all my sacrifices, my comfort, my safety, and now my financial independence were a given. Well, he was in for a surprise when Maria found an empty house. I drove away, feeling as though I were leaving someone else's life behind. The familiar streets of the neighborhood flashed by, but I had no idea where I was going. The only thing I was certain of was that I couldn't go back. I drove aimlessly, questions swirling in my mind. Where would I live? How would I survive? How do you start over at 35? The unknown was terrifying, but not as much as the thought of returning to that environment of aggression and manipulation. After about an hour, I realized I needed a plan. I pulled over at a small roadside cafe, the kind of place Andre would have turned his nose up at. Inside, it smelled of coffee and bacon, and for the first time that day, I felt hungry. After ordering a coffee, I pulled out my phone. Scrolling through my contacts for someone I could trust, I saw Katya's name again. We'd barely spoken in the past year, but I remembered how she'd always been on my side, even when I pushed her away. My fingers hesitated as doubts crept in. What if she didn't care anymore? What if she thought I was overreacting? But then I remembered Andre's rage-distorted face, the mug flying toward me, and I knew I had to try. I pressed the call button and held my breath as it rang. On the third ring, a familiar voice answered. "Lena, are you okay?" Hearing the concern in her voice, even after so long, broke me, and I burst into tears. Through sobs, I recounted everything. The argument with Andre, the mug thrown at me, and my escape from the house. Katya listened silently, occasionally letting out sympathetic murmurs and expressing outrage at Andre's behavior. When my confession ended, she was quiet for a few seconds before speaking softly. "Lena, I'm so sorry you had to go through this, but I'm so proud of you for leaving. You made the right choice." Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. For too long, I'd doubted my own feelings and perceptions, and now, having someone validate my decision meant more than I could have imagined. We talked, and a plan began to take shape. Katya knew a lawyer who specialized in helping women escape abusive relationships. She offered to arrange a meeting for the next day and insisted I stay with her in the meantime. "But you have kids," I said hesitantly, knowing Katya had 2 little ones. "I don't want to impose." "Nonsense," she said firmly. "Your family, too. We have a guest room, and the kids will love having Aunt Lena around." By the end of our conversation, I realized I'd found not just a shoulder to cry on, but a real chance to climb out of this nightmare. I hung up, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't alone, and for the first time in a long while, I felt hope. I finished my coffee, left a generous tip for the waitress, and headed to my car. Punching Katya's address into the GPS, I felt a storm of emotions. Fear, sadness, but also a flicker of excitement. This wasn't the end of my story. It was a new beginning. As I pulled up to Katya's house, I teetered between relief and anxiety. The small 2-story house with a neatly trimmed lawn and flower beds bursting with color was so different from the cold, modern home I'd shared with Andre. I sat in the car for a few seconds, gathering my courage. What if Katya had changed her mind? What if her husband, Artem, didn't want me there? But before those thoughts could take hold, the front door flew open and Katya ran out to greet me. She looked just as I remembered, her red curls a mess, her warm green eyes brimming with hospitality. Without hesitation, she pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh, Lena!" Her voice trembled with emotion. "I'm so glad you're here." I felt something inside me break, and all the fear, anger, and pain I'd been holding back for so long came pouring out. I sobbed into Katya's shoulder, letting out years of pent-up emotions. She held me tightly, stroking my back and murmuring softly, "It's okay. You're safe now." We're here. Finally, wiping away my tears, I saw Artem standing in the doorway. He smiled and nodded. Welcome, Lena. Come on in. I just made some coffee. Their home was warm and cozy, filled with the happy chaos of a family with young children. Toys were scattered across the floor, and the walls were adorned with children's drawings, a stark contrast to the rigid order Andrei always demanded. Katya and I settled in the kitchen with cups of hot coffee while her kids, Emma and Denise, peeked curiously around the corner. 7-year-old Emma recognized me and ran over for a hug, while 4-year-old Dennis shyly hid behind his sister. Aunt Lena, Emma exclaimed. Are you staying with us? Let's have a sleepover in the guest room. I smiled, surprised at how good it felt to be wanted again. Not tonight, sweetie, but maybe another time, okay? Artem took the kids away so we could talk privately. I turned to Katya. Thank you, I said, my voice trembling again. I don't know what I'd do without you. That's what friends are for, she said, squeezing my hand. Now let's figure out what to do next. Over the next couple of hours, I poured out all the details of how my relationship with Andrei had deteriorated over the years and how I'd slowly lost myself. I feel so stupid, I admitted, staring into my cup. I should have left ages ago. How did I let it get this far? You're not stupid, Lena, Katya said firmly. People who hurt others are masters of manipulation. They break you down so gradually that you don't even notice it happening. The important thing is that you left now. As we talked, Katya and I began to form a plan. She'd already arranged a meeting with her friend, a lawyer named Sarah, for the next morning. Sarah specializes in cases like this, Katya explained. She'll help you navigate the legal side and keep you safe. The thought of divorce was daunting, but also liberating. I'd been stuck in a cycle of hope and disappointment for so long, always believing tomorrow would be better. Now I was ready to break free. What about work? I asked suddenly, remembering my part-time library job, the position Andrei had deemed suitable for me after I gave up my dream of becoming a writer. Katya's eyes lit up. You know, I have an idea. Remember my cousin Margot? She owns a little bookstore downtown called Cozy Corner. She mentioned the other day that she needs an assistant. It's not much, but it could be a good start. The idea of working in a bookstore, surrounded by stories and the scent of paper and ink, made my heart leap. It was so different from the corporate world Andrei had always tried to push me into. But it felt like the right choice now. As the evening drew to a close, we started making lists of things to do, people to contact, items to buy. There was so much to figure out, but having a plan gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in years. Oh! Katya exclaimed suddenly. I almost forgot. I have something for you. She left the room and returned with a small gift bag. Inside was a new cell phone. I bought this earlier today, she explained. It's a prepaid phone. Andrei won't be able to track your calls or see your history. Use this from now on. It'll be safer. I stared at the phone, feeling a lump rise in my throat. It seemed like a small thing, but to me it was another step toward freedom. Thank you, I whispered, unable to find the words to express my gratitude. When we finished planning, Katya insisted I stay in their guest room. You need a safe place to sleep, she said firmly. Tomorrow we'll go to the hotel where you checked in. You can grab your things and check out. That night, I lay in an unfamiliar bed, listening to the quiet sounds of a happy family life through the walls. My thoughts drifted to Andrei. By now, he must have noticed I was gone. Was he worried? Angry? Or did he even care? I pictured Maria showing up at Andrei's house, expecting to get my credit card. The thought brought a brief, almost guilty satisfaction. But then I remembered his rage-filled face, the mug flying at me, and my resolve hardened. As I drifted off, I found myself thinking about the future. For the first time in years. How did I want to live? Who did I want to be now that I was no longer defined by my role as Andre's wife? The next morning, I woke up early, feeling more refreshed than I had in months. The smell of coffee and bacon wafted from the kitchen, and I could hear Katya's kids getting ready for the day with cheerful noise. I lay there for a moment, savoring the peace. Then I got up, ready to face the challenges ahead. After a shower, I went down for breakfast. The kids were chattering excitedly about their plans, while Artem quizzed them on their homework between bites. It was such a simple, genuine family moment. My heart ached. This was what a family should be. As Katya and I prepared to meet with her lawyer friend Sarah, I felt a mix of nervous excitement and determination. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Andre wouldn't let me go without a fight, and I wasn't sure what obstacles I'd face. But looking at Katya, who had dropped everything to help me, I realized one thing. I wasn't alone. I had friends, support, and most importantly, I had hope again. Before leaving the house, I pulled out my new phone. After a moment's hesitation, I typed a message to Andre. "I'm safe. I'm not coming back. Please don't try to contact me. My lawyer will be in touch." My finger hovered over the send button. Doubts crept in. What if I was making a mistake? Should I give him another chance? But then I saw Andre's rage-filled face in my mind, years of manipulation and control. I realized this wasn't just about escaping a bad situation. It was about reclaiming my life, my identity, and my future. I pressed send. As Katya and I walked to the car, I felt as though a heavy weight had been lifted from my shoulders. The path ahead was unknown and full of challenges, but now I was the one choosing how to walk it. I climbed into the passenger seat, ready for the next step. "Ready?" Katya asked, smiling as she started the engine. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Ready?" And we drove off, heading toward my new future. Sarah Rechetova's law office wasn't at all what I'd expected. Instead of the cold, sterile atmosphere I'd imagined, it was warm and cozy. Potted plants sat in the corners, and bright, abstract paintings hung on the walls. As Katya and I waited in the reception area, I studied one particularly vivid canvas, trying to decipher what the artist had meant to express. "Lena!" a voice called, pulling me back to reality. I looked up to see a woman in her mid-40s with a kind but no-nonsense gaze. "I'm Sarah. Please come in." We settled into her office, and Sarah immediately noticed the fading bruise on my cheek. Her expression softened. Katya had already filled her in on the basics. She spoke quietly. "But I'd like to hear everything from you directly, if you're okay with that." For the next hour, I told her my story. Sarah listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification and taking notes. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair, her eyes reflecting both empathy and determination. "Lena," she said in a firm but warm tone, "what happened to you is unacceptable. It's abuse, plain and simple. But you've already taken the hardest step. You left. Now let's talk about how we can protect you and secure your future." The next few hours were spent discussing our plan. Sarah explained that she'd file for divorce immediately, citing irreconcilable differences and Andre's abusive behavior. She outlined how a restraining order worked and what temporary alimony I might be entitled to while I got back on my feet. "What about the house?" I asked, thinking of the 3-bedroom home where Andre and I had lived for 6 years. Sarah's eyes gleamed slightly. "I have an idea. Given Andre's behavior, we can request exclusive use of the house for you during the proceedings. It'll give you an advantage in the divorce process." The thought of returning to that house made my stomach churn, but I understood the tactical value of the move. There was another issue I couldn't ignore, though. "Andre's sister, Maria," I said hesitantly. "She played a big role in our arguments. Andre said she'd come over to get my credit card. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. We'll need to address that too. Financial abuse is a serious matter. We'll have to protect your assets and credit history. By the end of our meeting, I felt a mix of emotions. Fear, uncertainty, but also a growing sense of inner strength. Sarah had given me a roadmap, a way out I hadn't seen before. Remember, she said as she walked us to the door, you're stronger than you think. It won't be easy, but you'll get through this. And most importantly, you won't have to do it alone. Back at Katya's house, we sat at the kitchen table and went over everything Sarah had said. Katya, whose organizational skills as a teacher came in handy, made a to-do list. Okay, she said, tapping her pen on the paper. We need to gather all your important documents, change your passwords, and start documenting everything. She placed her hand over mine and squeezed. You don't owe anything to anyone. We're friends. Besides, she added with a sly smile, I always knew Andre was a jerk. It's about time someone put him in his place. The rest of the day was spent on calls and emails. I canceled our joint credit cards, changed passwords for all my online accounts, and even set up a new email address. With each step, it felt like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that I'd lost in the marriage. That evening, Katya's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and looked at me with a mix of excitement and concern. It's Margot, about the job at the bookstore. She's asking if you can come for an interview tomorrow. My heart raced. Working in a bookstore, surrounded by books. It was a dream I'd always had, but Andre had deemed it impractical. Now, I had the chance to make that dream a reality. Yes, I said firmly, surprising myself with my own determination. Tell her I'll be there. That night, lying in the guest bed, I couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about Andre. Was he worried or angry? Or did he not care at all? I pictured Maria showing up at an empty house, hoping to get my credit card, and felt a slight pang of guilt. But stronger than the guilt was the sense of freedom, the feeling that I was taking my life back. The next morning, I woke up early, feeling a nervous energy I hadn't felt in years. Katya helped me pick out an outfit for the interview, a simple but elegant blouse and skirt that made me feel professional yet true to myself. The bookstore, cozy corner, was even better than I'd imagined. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, and the air smelled of paper and ink. Katya's cousin, Margot, was a cheerful woman with a short pixie cut and an infectious laugh. So, she said, after we chatted about books and my experience, Katya mentioned you're going through a tough time. I hesitated, unsure how much to share, but the kindness in Margot's eyes made me feel safe. I'm leaving my husband, I said, the words still feeling strange in my mouth. I need a fresh start. Margot nodded, her expression turning serious. I understand. I can't offer you a high salary, but I can give you a calm place to work, a flexible schedule, and the chance to be surrounded by books all day. How does that sound? It sounded like paradise. When can I start? I asked, unable to hide my eagerness. Margot laughed. How about Monday? That gives you a few days to sort things out. Leaving the store with a new employee handbook in hand, I felt a surge of hope. For the first time in years, I was making decisions and building a life for myself. But my happiness didn't last long. When I returned to Katya's house, I found her pacing nervously in the kitchen, her face tense. What's wrong? I asked, my heart sinking. Katya hesitated, then handed me her phone. On the screen was a series of messages from Andre. Cold fear gripped my chest. Where is she? Demanded the first message. I know you're hiding her, read the next. The tone grew increasingly aggressive, and the final threat made me freeze. If she doesn't come home tonight, I'll come get her myself. The world tilted around me, my legs nearly giving out, and Katya steadied me, guiding me to a chair. Calm down, she said firmly. "He doesn't know you're here. We won't let him touch you." But I knew Andre wouldn't stop once he set his mind to something. The thought of him showing up here and putting Katya and her family in danger made me nauseous. "I need to leave," I said, my voice trembling. "I can't put you at risk." Katya shook her head fiercely. "No way. We're in this together." Then she looked at me with a glint of determination in her eyes. "I have an idea." She quickly dialed a number on her phone. "Sarah, it's Katya. We need your help. How fast can we get a restraining order?" As Katya explained the situation to Sarah, I sat at the kitchen table, my mind racing through the events of the past few days. My escape from Andre, meeting Katya, the lawyer consultation, the job offer at the bookstore. I'd come so far. Would I let Andre drag me back? A plan began to form in my mind. Risky, maybe even a little harsh. But remembering Andre's threats, the years of manipulation and control, I knew there was no other way. When Katya finished her call, I took a deep breath. "I have an idea," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "But I'll need your help." I explained my plan, and Katya's eyes widened. Then a slow, approving smile spread across her face. "Oh, Lena," she said, her voice tinged with admiration. "I always knew you were capable of more." The rest of the day was spent preparing, making calls, writing emails, working out the details. By evening, I felt a strange calm. Whatever happened next, I was ready. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the living room. I sat by the window, staring out at the street. Soon, Andre would make his move, but this time, I was ready too. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid. I was determined to face whatever came on my own terms. The calm before the storm was almost over. The sky had turned shades of orange and pink when I heard a car pull into the driveway. My heart raced, and peering through the curtain, I recognized the familiar black Audi. Andre's Audi. Maria was in the passenger seat. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. This is it, the moment of truth. "They're here," I said to Katya, who was sitting on the couch pretending to be occupied with something trivial, though the tension in the room was palpable. She nodded and gave me an encouraging smile. "Remember, you've got this. We're right here." Through the window, I watched as Andre and Maria got out of the car. Their faces were a mix of anger and smugness. Andre was wearing his favorite business suit, the one he used to intimidate people. Maria, dressed in an expensive dress and heels, looked ready for a party, not a family confrontation. They walked toward the front door, and even through the glass, I could hear their voices carrying in the warm evening air. "I can't believe she had the nerve to just up and leave," Maria said loudly, her voice dripping with indignation. "After everything you've done for her." Andre's reply was too quiet to make out, but I could tell from the tense line of his jaw what kind of mood he was in. The doorbell rang, a cheerful sound that clashed sharply with the heavy atmosphere in the house. Katya squeezed my hand one last time and went to answer it. "Andre, Maria, what a surprise," I heard Katya say in an even tone. "Cut the act, Katya," Andre growled. "Where is she?" "I know Lena's here." "Why don't you come in?" Katya suggested, still calm. "We can discuss this civilly." I heard their footsteps in the hallway. My heart pounded, my palms grew sweaty, but I forced myself to stay outwardly calm. I had a plan, and I was going to stick to it. Andre burst into the living room first, his gaze locking onto me immediately. For a brief moment, I saw a flicker of relief in his eyes, but it quickly turned to fury. "Lena," he said, his voice dangerously low. "Do you even realize what you're doing?" I straightened, squaring my shoulders, and looked him directly in the eye. "I'm leaving you, Andre," I said, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "Our marriage is over." Maria let out a theatrical gasp, and Andre's face flushed red. "You can't just leave," he spat. "You're my wife. You have duties, responsibilities." "My only responsibility is to myself," I replied calmly, feeling my resolve grow. "I'm done being your punching bag, Andre. I'm done watching you put your sister ahead of our marriage." Maria stepped forward, her eyes blazing with anger. "How dare you? Andre has always taken care of you." "You ungrateful little—" "Enough!" Katya interrupted, her voice sharp and commanding. "This is between Lena and Andre, not you, Maria." Andre turned to Katya, clenching his fists. "Stay out of this. It's a family matter." "Family?" I let out a bitter laugh, hearing the edge in my own voice. "Is that what you call it when you throw a coffee mug at my face? When you demand I give my credit card to your sister?" A flicker of embarrassment crossed Andre's face, but he quickly regained control. "You're exaggerating. It was just a small argument." "If you'd come home, we could have worked it out." I shook my head, feeling a mix of sadness and unwavering certainty. "No, Andre, it can't be worked out anymore." "I've made my decision." "You don't get to decide for both of us," he shouted, taking a step toward me. "I won't let you ruin everything." Andre's approach still sent a jolt of fear through me, but suddenly a new voice cut through the room. "Don't move any closer, Mr. Kamensky." We all turned. Standing in the doorway of the living room was Mr. Rechetov, his posture and gaze commanding respect. Impeccably dressed in a pressed suit with a stern demeanor, he was a true professional. Andre's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in suspicion. "What the hell? Who are you?" Mr. Rechetov stepped into the room with calm, measured movements. "I'm Lena's lawyer, Mr. Kamensky, and I strongly advise you to step away from my client." Andre's face was almost comical as he looked from Mr. Rechetov to me and back again. "A lawyer? Lena, what's going on?" I took a deep breath, drawing strength from Mr. Rechetov's presence. "Exactly what it looks like, Andre. I'm filing for divorce." "Divorce?" Maria gasped even louder. "Andre, do something!" But Andre stood frozen, his face a mask of shock. Mr. Rechetov took advantage of his hesitation. "Mrs. Kamenskaya has retained me to handle her divorce proceedings," he said in a formal tone laced with steel. "From now on, all communication regarding this matter must go through me." Andre finally found his voice. "This is absurd," he said. "Lena, you can't just file for divorce without even talking to me." "It seems you did plenty of talking when you threw a coffee mug at her face, Mr. Kamensky," Mr. Rechetov said coldly. "I'd say that was the end of the conversation." Andre paled. That was an accident. I didn't mean to." "Save your excuses for the court, Andre," I interrupted. "I'm done listening to your apologies." Maria, who had been suspiciously quiet, finally spoke up. "What about me?" she exclaimed, her eyes flashing. "What about my needs? Andre promised me." Mr. Rechetov turned to her with an unflinching gaze. "Mrs. Kamenskaya's finances are no longer your concern, Ms. Kamenskaya. Any arrangements you had with your brother do not extend to my client or her assets." Maria's mouth fell open, but she couldn't find words, gaping like a fish out of water. Andre, however, began to recover, and his shock turned back to anger. "You think you can just walk away?" he growled. "After everything I've done for you. After everything I gave you." Anger flared inside me. "Gave?" I echoed bitterly. "What did you give me, Andre? A life where I had to walk on eggshells, where I had to give up my dreams, my friends, even myself. That's not a gift. It's a prison." My words hit Andre like a physical blow. He staggered for a moment, confusion and pain flashing in his eyes. I even caught a glimpse of the man I'd once fallen in love with.
But then his face hardened again. "Fine," he spat with disdain. "If you want a war, you'll get one. I'll fight to the end, Lena." "You won't get anything." Mr. Rechetov stepped forward, positioning himself between me and Andrei. "I wouldn't recommend that approach, Mr. Kamensky. My client has ample evidence of your abuse. If you choose to contest this in court, the truth will come out. Think carefully. Is it worth it?" Andrei paled. Then his face flushed with rage. He opened his mouth to argue, but Mr. Rechetov cut him off. "I think this conversation is over," he said firmly. "I'll contact you regarding the divorce paperwork. In the meantime, I strongly suggest you refrain from contacting Mrs. Kamenskaya directly." Andrei looked like he wanted to keep arguing, but something in Mr. Rechetov's gaze made him think twice. He turned to me, his eyes filled with anger and something almost like fear, a silent threat. "This isn't over, Lena," he rasped. I met his gaze, unflinching. "You're wrong, Andrei. It's over." He glared at me with fury and stormed out the door, Maria trailing behind him like a scolded puppy. When the front door slammed shut, I felt my knees buckle with relief. Katya was at my side in an instant, supporting me as I sank onto the couch. "You did it," she whispered, hugging me. "I'm so proud of you, Lena." Mr. Rechetov cleared his throat discreetly. "You handled that remarkably well, Mrs. Kamenskaya. It's not easy to confront someone who's abused you, but you showed incredible strength." I looked up at him, feeling both gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you," I whispered. "I couldn't have done it without your help." He nodded, a faint smile softening his stern face. "This is just the beginning, but you've taken the hardest step. We'll handle the rest together." As Mr. Rechetov gathered his papers, I sat on the couch, trying to process everything that had happened in those short, intense minutes. I'd been so afraid of this confrontation, and now it was over. I hadn't just survived it. I'd stood up for myself. Katya returned with a cup of hot tea, sitting beside me and handing it over. "How are you feeling?" she asked gently. I took a sip, letting the warm liquid soothe me. "Honestly, I don't know. Relieved, I guess. Scared. And free." Katya squeezed my hand. "That's normal. You're facing big changes. But remember, you're not alone." As the adrenaline from the confrontation faded, I felt the weight of everything settle heavily on my shoulders. But alongside the exhaustion and fear, something else stirred. A tiny spark of hope, bright and warm. For the first time in years, I could build my own future. It wouldn't be easy. But sitting there with Katya, a cup of tea in my hands, watching the sun set on the horizon, I knew I was ready for whatever life had in store. The weeks following my confrontation with Andrei flew by in a whirlwind of paperwork, meetings, and emotional ups and downs. Each day brought challenges, but also small victories I cherished. Like the first night I slept without nightmares, the first time I laughed without feeling guilty, or the first day I didn't think about Andrei at all. Katya insisted I stay with them until I got back on my feet. Despite my protests, she said, "Nonsense. That's what friends are for. Plus, the kids love having you around." And it was true. Emma and Dennis started calling me Aunt Lena, inviting me to join their games and listen to their wild stories. Their childish sincerity and affection began to heal my wounded soul. My new job at Cozy Corner quickly became a sanctuary. Margot was a patient and understanding boss. She always had a kind word or a cup of tea ready when she saw I was struggling. The steady rhythm of work, shelving books, helping customers find their next read, and immersing myself in stories kept me grounded when everything else felt chaotic. One rainy afternoon, about a month after I left Andrei,
I was organizing the fiction section when I spotted a familiar title, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. I remembered reading it in college. The story of Liza Popova, who found herself and learned to stand up for her own desires, had resonated with me even then. On a whim, I pulled the book off the shelf and started rereading. Diving back into Liza's story, I felt a kinship I hadn't experienced in years. Her pursuit of independence, her desire to live on her own terms, it hit me with a sharp pang of recognition. When I reached the part where Liza says, "I would give up the unessential, money, even life, but I will never give up myself," tears welled up in my eyes. Margot, seeing me sitting on the floor between the shelves, quietly crying, sat beside me without a word, handed me a tissue, and just stayed there. When I calmed down and explained what was going on, she said thoughtfully, "You know, books have a way of showing up in our lives when we need them most. Maybe this is your awakening, Lena." Her words stuck with me for a long time. That night, lying in Katya's guest room, I thought about everything I'd given up during my marriage to Andre. My writing ambitions, my dream of traveling, even my favorite foods, all sacrificed to keep the peace and be a good wife to Andre. The next morning, I woke up with a sense of determination I hadn't felt in years. I dug my old laptop out of the depths of my suitcase and, for the first time in ages, started writing. The words came out messy, raw, but honest. I wrote about our marriage, about how my sense of self had been slowly eroded, and about the moment I decided to leave. It might not have been perfect, but it was mine. Days turned into weeks, and my life settled into a new routine. In the mornings, I wrote, pouring all the emotions and thoughts I'd bottled up for years onto the page, often before the rest of the world woke up. Then I'd head to the bookstore, where I found solace in the world of literature and quiet camaraderie with fellow book lovers. Evenings were spent with Katya and her family, or alone, rediscovering old hobbies and interests I'd long forgotten. Mr. Rechetov kept me updated on the divorce proceedings. Andre, true to his word, fought every step of the way. But with Mr. Rechetov's help and all the evidence we'd gathered, I felt confident in our chances. Each update brought a mix of anxiety and relief. Anxiety about the next confrontation, and relief that I was one step closer to full freedom. One Saturday morning, a couple of months after I left Andre, Katya convinced me to join her for a yoga class. "It'll be good for you," she insisted. "It'll help you reconnect with yourself." I was skeptical, but agreed to give it a try. The studio was a warm, welcoming space. Soft music, the scent of lavender, a calming atmosphere. As we moved through the poses, I felt not just physical stiffness, but emotional tension. Years of stress and strain had left my body rigid and inflexible. But as I breathed in and out, moving through each pose, I felt something slowly release. At the end of the class, during Savasana, the instructor's voice seemed to pierce right through me. "You are strong. You are worthy. You are enough." And for the first time in a long time, I believed those words. After the class, I stepped out of the studio feeling a little tired, but more alive than I had in years. I turned to Katya. "Thank you," was all I could manage. She smiled, her eyes full of understanding, and gave my hand a quick squeeze. That night, I dreamed of Andre. In the dream, he was yelling at me, his face red with anger, but I couldn't hear a sound. It was like watching a silent movie. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, but soon I realized something. This time, his anger didn't scare me. I felt sad for what he'd become, but I no longer felt responsible for his emotions. The next morning, I shared my feelings with Katya over coffee. She listened intently, then said, "You know, Lena, I think you're ready for the next step." "What do you mean?" I asked, curiosity sparking inside me. "I think it's time for you to find your own place," Katya said gently. "Not because we don't love having you here, but because I think you're ready to stand on your own 2 feet."
The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. Could I afford a place on my own? Support myself? But the more I thought about it, the more I realized Katya was right. It was time. Finding an apartment was both exciting and exhausting. There was so much to consider: location, cost, safety. But with Katya's help and my growing confidence, I finally found a tiny studio near the bookstore. Small, but mine. Moving day was a whirlwind of activity. Katya, Artem, and even the kids helped carry boxes, and by evening, my modest belongings were unpacked, and my new space was starting to feel like home. As we all sat on the floor eating pizza and laughing about our makeshift furniture arrangement, I felt overwhelming gratitude for these people who had become my true family. After everyone left, I stood in the middle of my new apartment, taking it all in. The second-hand furniture, a few keepsakes from my life with Andre, and new purchases I'd made just for myself. It all came together to create a space that was truly mine. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. For the first time in months, I let myself think about the future. Not just the immediate future of the divorce and settling in, but the long-term future. What did I want, and who did I want to become? My grandmother's words came to mind. Life is a story, and you're the author. For too long, I'd let others dictate my story. Andre, his family, societal expectations. But now, the pen was in my hands, and I could write any story I wanted. My gaze fell on the small table in the corner where my laptop sat. An idea struck me. Maybe it was time to return to the novel I'd always dreamed of writing. Not for Andre or anyone's approval, but for myself. With that thought, I sat down and opened my laptop. The blank page no longer scared me. It felt full of possibilities. I took a deep breath and started typing. Chapter 1. Awaking. The words flowed freely, and I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. There were still challenges and uncertainties ahead. The divorce wasn't finalized, and memories of what I'd been through sometimes hit me like a heavy wave. But sitting there in my new apartment, writing my own story, I knew one thing. I was going to be okay. Better than okay. I was going to thrive. This wasn't just a new chapter in my life. It was a new book, and I couldn't wait to see how it would unfold on the pages ahead. As the first rays of sunlight began to brighten the window, I finally pulled myself away from the text. Time had lost all meaning. I hadn't even noticed the hours flying by. Stretching, feeling a pleasant tiredness in my muscles, I went to the kitchen to make coffee. Watching the sun paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, I raised my mug in a silent toast. To new beginnings, to newfound strength, and to the endless possibilities that lay ahead, to my new chapter.